A coffee spill on a crisp suit sparks a collision that rewrites fate. Alice Martins, a secretary buried in debt, stumbles into David Scott, her steely CEO, and lands in a 6-month fake engagement to save her family and his reputation. What begins as a cold deal ignites into a maze of longing, secrets, and stakes. The heart signs contract the mind can't read. Can pretense bloom into true love, or will fear tear them apart? Share where you're listening from below and subscribe to follow their journey. Will Alice crack David's icy walls, or is their story just a fleeting clause? Stay glued for twists that'll hook you until the final moment. The city pulsed with its usual chaos, horns blaring and heels clicking against concrete. But for Alice Martins, the world was a blur of panic. Her alarm had betrayed her, screeching an hour late, and now she was sprinting down the sidewalk, one hand clutching a to-go coffee, the other fumbling with her phone. Her nose grazed the screen in a desperate attempt to unlock it. Her hands were too full for finesse. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she muttered, dodging a lamppost and an elderly woman pushing a shopping cart with the precision of a seasoned urban warrior. The Scott Enterprises building loomed ahead, a glass and steel monolith that gleamed under the morning sun, mocking her tardiness. This interview was her lifeline, her last shot to claw her way out of overdue bills and an eviction notice that haunted her mailbox. She wouldn't mess this up. Her sneakers pounded the pavement as she picked up speed, heart hammering like a drum in her chest. The crosswalk light blinked red, but Alice didn't slow. She was close, so close when, bam, her body slammed into something solid, unyielding, like a brick wall draped in fine wool. Her coffee cup flew from her grip, and time seemed to stretch as she watched the brown liquid arc through the air, a slow-motion disaster. A sharp gasp, not hers, cut through the noise, and then, with a sickening splatter, the coffee landed square on a man's chest, soaking his pristine white shirt and tailored gray suit. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Alice's eyes widened, her breath catching as she took in the damage. The man looked down at the stain, then up at her, his face a mask of controlled fury. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp gray eyes that pierced like steel. His jawline could have been chiseled by a sculptor with a vendetta for softness. But his expression screamed one thing: trouble. Before he could speak, Alice's survival instincts kicked into overdrive, and she launched into what she'd later call her emergency justification mode. "Okay, first of all, this was clearly your fault," she blurted, pointing at the ground as if it held evidence. The man blinked, stunned, his lips parting slightly. "Yes, your fault. You were standing right here like a human obstacle course. I tried to move, but you didn't budge." His eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint flickering within them, and Alice quickly pivoted. "Or, maybe it was the coffee's fault. These cups are slippery, and I swear that the barista uses defective lids. It's a conspiracy, really." The man crossed his arms, unimpressed, the coffee stains spreading like a dark omen across his shirt. "Interesting theory," he said, his voice low and smooth, laced with a sarcasm that made her skin prickle. "Got any more?" Alice forced a nervous laugh, her mind scrambling for an escape. "Look, on the bright side, your suit's got character now. You're basically starting the spilled coffee chic trend. Very exclusive." She flashed a grin, hoping to diffuse the tension, but his expression didn't soften. Instead, he took a deep breath, rubbed a hand across his face, and stepped closer, towering over her. "I don't have time for this," he said, each word clipped and deliberate. "Next time, try not to turn strangers into your personal canvas." With one last icy glare, he turned and strode toward the Scott Enterprises building, his long legs carrying him with the confidence of a king dismissing a peasant. Alice stood frozen, her soul practically tiptoeing out of her body. Great, Alice. First disaster of the day, check. Then it hit her, the interview. Oh crap, she gasped, glancing at her phone. 5 minutes left. She bolted toward the building, her bag slapping against her hip, praying the coffee fiasco hadn't doomed her chances. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass, cool air washing over her as she skidded to a stop at the reception desk. The receptionist, a woman with a flawless bun and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, glanced up. Alice Martins? Mr. Scott is expecting you. Take the elevator to the 32nd floor. Alice nodded, her stomach twisting as she stepped into the elevator. She smoothed her slightly wrinkled blouse, trying to channel confidence she didn't feel. You've got this. Nothing can go wrong now. The doors slid open, revealing a sleek hallway, lined with abstract art and frosted glass doors. She followed the directions to a conference room, her heart pounding louder with each step. Taking a deep breath, she knocked and pushed the door open. And there he was, the coffee man. Sitting behind an imposing mahogany desk, his stained shirt now covered by a fresh blazer. But those same gray eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her legs wobble. His expression was unreadable, though a faint twitch at the corner of his mouth suggested he was either amused or plotting her demise. Alice's knees buckled, and she gripped the doorframe to steady herself. This can't be happening. David Scott, CEO of Scott Enterprises, leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. So, you're here for the secretary position, he said, his tone carrying a hint of mockery. Alice wanted to vanish, to melt into the floor and never resurface. Instead, she forced herself to step forward, her voice barely steady. Yes, Mr. Scott, that's me. Have a seat, Miss Martins, he said, gesturing to a chair. She sat so quickly, she nearly missed it, her hands twisting in her lap. David flipped through a file. Her resume, she assumed, his silence stretching into an eternity. The coffee stain lingered in her mind, a glaring reminder of her spectacular failure. Finally, he spoke, his eyes never leaving the papers. Your resume is impressive. Top of your class? Strong references. But tell me, why should I hire you as my secretary? Alice swallowed, her mouth dry. How was she supposed to sell herself after turning his suit into a Jackson Pollock painting? She took a shaky breath, forcing professionalism into her voice. I'm efficient, highly organized, and I thrive under pressure. She paused, then added with a weak smile, and I don't usually spill coffee on my bosses. Silence. Then, to her shock, David's lips curved into a fleeting smile, so quick she almost missed it. You work well under pressure, he repeated, glancing at his blazer, likely hiding the stained shirt beneath. Interesting claim. His tone was dry, but there was a spark in his eyes, something calculating. Why do you want this job? Alice straightened, sensing a test. I'm competent and I believe I can contribute to your company's success. Her voice grew steadier, but David's gaze didn't waver. And because you need the money, he said, not a question. Alice's eyes widened, her face flushing. How did he... He turned a page in the file, his voice casual but cutting. Short-term jobs, late bill payments, and eviction notice last week. Am I wrong? Her stomach dropped. How do you know that? She demanded, then bit her tongue. Challenging the CEO mid-interview wasn't exactly a winning strategy. David's smile was small, almost predatory. Background checks, perfectly legal with the right lawyers. He set the file down, folding his hands. So, Miss Martins, convince me you're worth the risk. Alice's mind raced. She could walk out, preserve her dignity, and let the bills bury her. Or she could fight. I'm not just my mistakes, she said, meeting his gaze. I'm reliable, quick on my feet, and I learn fast. Give me a chance and I'll prove it, coffee spills and all. David studied her, his expression unreadable. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the decision hung like a guillotine. Then he leaned forward, his voice low. "You start Monday. Don't be late." Alice blinked, her heart stuttering. Thank you, Mr. Scott." He waved a hand, dismissing her. "And Miss Martins? Try to keep the coffee in the cup next time." She nodded, scrambling to her feet, her mind a whirlwind of relief and dread. As she left the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that David Scott's piercing gaze followed her, or that this job, this man, was about to turn her life upside down. Alice Martins stood in the elevator of Scott Enterprises, her first official day as David Scott's secretary, stretching before her like an uncharted minefield. The memory of their coffee-soaked encounter and her nerve-wracking interview clung to her like damp clothes. But she'd survived, barely. Now, clutching a fresh notepad and a resolve to prove herself, she steeled her nerves as the doors slid open to the 32nd floor. David's warning echoed in her mind. Don't be late. She wasn't. Not today. The office buzzed with quiet efficiency, phones humming and keyboards clacking. But the air felt charged, as if everyone knew she was the girl who'd baptized the CEO's suit with coffee. Ignoring the curious glances, Alice navigated to her desk, outside David's corner office, a glass-walled fortress that radiated power. Her workspace was sleek, equipped with a computer and a phone that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She sat, smoothing her pencil skirt, and began sorting through a stack of memos when David's voice crackled through the intercom. "Miss Martins, my office now." Her stomach lurched. "Already?" She grabbed her notepad and hurried to his door, knocking lightly before entering. David sat behind his desk, his suit pristine, his gray eyes fixed on a laptop screen. He didn't look up. "Close the door," he said, his tone clipped. She obeyed, the click of the latch sounding ominously final. "Sit," he added, still not meeting her gaze. Alice perched on the edge of a leather chair, her pulse ticking like a metronome. Had she already screwed up? Misfiled something? Spilled coffee on someone else? Finally, David closed his laptop and leaned back, his expression unreadable but intense, like a predator sizing up its prey. "You're not here just to take notes," he began, his voice low and deliberate. "I have a proposition." He slid a folder across the desk, its edges crisp, its weight heavy with intent. "Open it." Alice's fingers trembled as she flipped it open. Inside was a contract, dense with legal jargon, but the bolded title made her breath catch. Temporary Engagement Agreement. She scanned the first page, her eyes snagging on phrases like 6-month term, public appearances, and confidentiality clause. Her head snapped up. "What is this?" David folded his hands, his gaze unwavering. "The board is questioning my stability as CEO. They think a single man projects irresponsibility, and it's hurting the company's image. I need a fiancé, publicly, convincingly, for 6 months. You're going to play that role." Alice's jaw dropped, a laugh bubbling up before she could stop it. "You're joking. Me, your fiancé?" The absurdity hit her like a slap, but David's face remained stone-cold serious. Her laughter died. "Why me? You could hire an actress, a model, anyone." "You're already here," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You're competent, you need the money, and after your memorable first impression, I know you can think on your feet." His lips twitched, almost a smirk. "Plus, I've seen your background. Late bills, an eviction notice, your mother's medical debt. This solves your problems." Her face burned, anger flaring at his casual dissection of her life. "That's none of your business," she snapped, then bit her lip, remembering he was her boss. But David didn't flinch. "It is when I'm offering you a way out," he countered. "A high salary, full coverage of your mother's medical expenses, and a bonus at the end. In return, You live with me, attend events, and sell the story of our engagement. 6 months, then we part ways. No strings. Alice stared at the contract, her mind a battlefield. The numbers listed were staggering, enough to clear her debts, secure her mother's treatment, and give her sister a future. But pretending to be engaged to David Scott, living with him, the man whose icy demeanor could freeze a room. She glanced up, searching his face for a crack in his armor, but found none. And if I say no, David shrugged, a flicker of challenge in his eyes. You won't. You can't afford to. The arrogance in his tone made her want to hurl the folder at him. But he was right. She was drowning, and this was a lifeline. Twisted, manipulative, but real. She exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. What exactly does this entail? You move into my apartment tonight, he said, leaning forward. We'll be seen together, dinners, galas, board meetings. You'll wear a ring, smile for cameras, and act like you're in love. No one can know it's fake, not even your family. Breach the contract, and you lose everything. Her stomach twisted. Live with you, like in your house. My apartment, he corrected, as if that softened the blow. Separate rooms, of course. It's about appearances, not anything else. His voice was firm, but a fleeting shadow crossed his face, too quick for her to decipher. Alice's fingers traced the contract's edge, her thoughts spiraling. She pictured her mother's hospital bills, the eviction notice taped to her door, her sister's worried eyes. Then she imagined sharing a home with David, his piercing gaze tracking her every move. It was insane, reckless, but what choice did she have? I need time to think, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. You have until end of day, David replied, standing to signal the conversation was over. Don't disappoint me, Miss Martins. She left his office in a daze, the contract burning a hole in her bag. The rest of the day passed in a blur of scheduling meetings and dodging co-workers' questions about her cozy chat with the boss. By 5 p.m., Alice sat alone at her desk, the office emptying around her. She reread the contract, each clause tightening the knot in her chest. It was a deal with the devil, cold, calculated, and dangerously tempting. At 5:58, she knocked on David's door. He looked up from his desk, his expression expectant but guarded. Well, Alice took a deep breath, her heart pounding. I'm in, but I have conditions. His eyebrow arched, and she pressed on. No overstepping boundaries. I do this my way, and if it gets too much, I walk. David studied her, a flicker of respect or amusement in his eyes. Deal. He extended his hand. She hesitated, then shook it, his grip firm and warm, sending an unexpected jolt through her. What have I done? That evening, Alice packed a suitcase in her cramped apartment, the weight of her decision settling like dust. David's driver arrived at 8 p.m., ushering her to a sleek black car. The ride to his penthouse was silent, the city lights blurring past. When they arrived, the building's lobby gleamed with marble and chandeliers, a far cry from her peeling wallpaper. The elevator climb to the top floor felt like an ascent into another world. David greeted her at the door, his tie loosened, his demeanor as controlled as ever. Welcome, he said, stepping aside. The apartment was a masterpiece of modern design. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and a view that stole her breath. But it was cold, sterile, like a museum no one lived in. Your room's down the hall, David said, pointing. Get settled. We start tomorrow. Alice nodded, clutching her suitcase as she followed his directions. Her room was larger than her entire apartment, with a plush bed and a cityscape view that glittered like a promise. But as she unpacked, a chill crept over her. She was in David Scott's world now, bound by a contract that felt like a leash. Tomorrow, she'd wear his ring, smile for his board, and play a part she barely understood. The question wasn't whether she could do it. It was whether she could survive the man behind the deal and the dangerous spark she felt when his eyes met hers. The mirror in Alice Martin's guest room reflected a stranger. The red gown, chosen by David Scott's stylist, hugged her curves with a boldness that made her cheeks flush. Its plunging neckline and flowing train screamed sophistication, a far cry from her usual thrift store blouses. She twirled, the fabric catching the light like liquid fire, and for a moment, she felt invincible. But the weight of the fake engagement ring on her finger, cold, heavy and glittering, grounded her. Tonight, at Scott Enterprises' charity gala, she and David would debut as a couple, a performance that could make or break their contract. She'd moved into his sterile penthouse a week ago, navigating his rules and icy demeanor. But this was different. This was a stage. And Alice wasn't sure she knew her lines. David waited in the living room, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection, his posture as rigid as the city skyline beyond the windows. He glanced up from his phone, his gray eyes sweeping over her. "You look presentable," he said, his tone flat, but a flicker in his gaze, sharp, almost hungry, betrayed him. Alice rolled her eyes, masking the flutter in her chest. "First rule of compliments: try to sound like you mean it." She adjusted her clutch, her voice teasing, but her nerves electric. "Ready to fake love for the cameras?" He stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Just follow my lead. Smile, nod, and don't spill anything." His lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk, and Alice shot him a mock glare, recalling their coffee-soaked first meeting. But there was no time for banter. The car was waiting. The gala venue was a glittering palace of chandeliers and marble, filled with the city's elite. Men in tailored suits, women dripping in diamonds, their laughter as polished as the crystal flutes they held. Alice's stomach churned as she and David entered, his hand resting lightly on her lower back, a touch that felt both possessive and performative. Heads turned, whispers rippling through the crowd. "David Scott's fiancée." The words buzzed like static, and Alice forced a smile, her heart pounding under the weight of 100 eyes. David guided her through the room, introducing her to board members and investors with practiced ease. She played her part, laughing at the right moments, nodding at talk of stocks and mergers. But the opulence felt suffocating, like a world she'd never belonged to. David, though, was in his element, his charm calculated, his every word a chess move. Yet beneath his control, Alice sensed a tension, a crack in his armor she couldn't place. She excused herself to the bar, needing a moment to breathe. Sipping a sparkling water, she scanned the room, trying to anchor herself. That's when she saw him, Lucas, her ex-boyfriend, leaning against a pillar, his familiar grin cutting through the crowd like a blade. Her glass trembled in her hand. Lucas, who'd cheated on her 2 years ago, leaving her to piece together a broken heart. What was he doing here? Before she could retreat, he spotted her, his eyes lighting up. "Alice." He sauntered over, his suit less polished than the others, but his confidence unshaken. "Wow, it's really you." Her throat tightened, old wounds flaring. "Lucas," she said, her voice cool but unsteady. "Didn't expect to see you here." He chuckled, undeterred. "I'm with a client, but you? At an event like this?" His gaze flicked over her gown, a hint of condescension in his smile. "This isn't your scene, is it?" Alice bristled, her grip on the glass tightening. "People change," she said, but the words felt hollow. Lucas had always belittled her dreams, her world too small for his ambitions. Before she could fire back, a shadow loomed beside her. David. His presence was a storm, quiet but electric. His eyes locked onto Lucas with surgical precision, assessing, dissecting. "Who's this?" he asked, his voice smooth but edged, his hand settling on Alice's waist. A claim, not a comfort. Lucas extended a hand, oblivious to the danger. "Lucas, Alice's ex. Nice to meet you." David didn't shake it. He crossed his arms, his stare cold enough to frost glass. "Interesting." The word dripped with dismissal. Alice felt the air thicken, tension coiling like a spring. Lucas, unfazed, grinned. "So, how'd you two meet?" "Alice never struck me as the fairy tale type." Alice opened her mouth, but David cut in, his voice velvet over steel. "Love at first sight." He pulled her closer, his grip firm, his eyes never leaving Lucas. "She spilled coffee on me, and I knew she was the one." Alice's eyes widened, her pulse racing. Love at first sight? The lie was brazen, but David's delivery was flawless, his smirk daring Lucas to challenge it. Lucas laughed, a touch nervous. "Really? Alice, you? That's surprising." David's smile didn't reach his eyes. "People change. And Alice and I? Inseparable." His tone was a warning, his hand tightening on her waist. Then, without warning, he turned to her, his gaze intense, and pulled her into a kiss. Not a peck, a deep, possessive kiss that stole her breath and silenced the room. Her body froze, then melted, the heat of his lips unraveling her defenses. It wasn't just acting. It was too raw, too real. When he pulled back, Lucas was gaping, the crowd murmuring. David's expression was calm, but his eyes burned. "Enjoy the gala," he said to Lucas, his voice a velvet blade. Lucas muttered a goodbye and fled, his confidence crumbling. Alice, still reeling, rounded on David as they stepped away. "What was that?" she hissed, her face burning, her heart a riot. "You didn't have to kiss me." David adjusted his cufflinks, unfazed. "He needed to get the message you're not available." His tone was matter-of-fact, but a shadow crossed his face. Jealousy? Possessiveness? She couldn't tell. "Message?" she snapped, crossing her arms. That felt personal. He met her gaze, his eyes unreadable. "It's part of the contract. Nothing more." But the way he lingered, the slight clench of his jaw, told a different story. Alice wanted to argue, to demand answers, but a board member called David over, and he walked away, leaving her in a sea of confusion. The kiss replayed in her mind, its intensity a puzzle she couldn't solve. Was it just a show, or had David felt it too? She touched her lips, her resolve fraying. Lucas's reappearance had rattled her, but David's reaction, his touch, his claim, had shaken her to her core. As the gala swirled on, Alice stood alone, the ring on her finger heavier than ever. She was playing a role, but the lines between pretense and truth were blurring. David was a fortress, his walls impenetrable. Yet that kiss had cracked something open. She didn't know what scared her more, the possibility that he felt nothing, or the chance that he did. One thing was certain. Tonight had changed the game, and Alice wasn't sure she knew the rules anymore. The memory of David Scott's kiss at the gala haunted Alice Martins like a song she couldn't unhear. It had been a week since that searing public display, and though David dismissed it as contractual, its heat lingered in her veins, a dangerous riddle. Living in his penthouse, navigating their fake engagement, was a tightrope walk. Every glance, every brush of his hand in public felt like a test she was failing. Alice tried to focus on her role, smile, pose, pretend. But the lines between acting and feeling were fraying, and David's guarded silence only tightened the knot in her chest. Now, as she stepped off a private jet onto the tarmac of a tropical resort, the stakes felt higher. David had called it a business trip, but Alice sensed something more. A shift, a crack in his armor she couldn't ignore. The resort was a paradise of swaying palms and turquoise waves, the air thick with salt and possibility. Alice's sundress fluttered in the breeze, her excitement bubbling despite David's stern reminder. "This is work, not a vacation," she grinned, undeterred, her eyes sparkling as she took in the infinity pool that seemed to kiss the horizon. "Sure, robot boss, but I'm hitting that pool later." David's only response was a sigh, but she caught the faintest twitch of his lips. A victory, however small. Their first meeting was in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the beach, where David negotiated with investors with his usual precision. Alice sat at his side, taking notes, her presence a silent prop in their charade. But her mind wandered, replaying the gala, Lucas's smug face, and David's possessive grip. Why had he kissed her like that? Why did it feel so real? She glanced at him, his profile sharp against the sunlight, and wondered what secrets lay behind those gray eyes. The meeting ended early, and Alice seized her chance. She changed into a swimsuit, grabbed a colorful drink, and sprawled on a lounge chair by the pool, the sun warming her skin. For the first time in weeks, she felt light, free from the weight of pretense. But the sky had other plans. Clouds gathered, dark and heavy, and within minutes, a fierce wind whipped through the resort. Staff scrambled to secure umbrellas, and Alice barely had time to grab her towel before rain poured down like a vengeful tide. She ran, shrieking, her sandals slapping against wet stone paths, her hair plastered to her face. The downpour was relentless, soaking her to the bone. "This is not the vacation vibe," she yelled to no one, laughing despite herself. Then, a voice cut through the storm. "Alice!" David stood at the hotel entrance, dry and composed, his arms crossed. "What are you doing out here?" She skidded to a stop under the awning, dripping and shivering. "Dancing in the rain, obviously." She wrung out her hair, grinning, but his gaze lingered, slow and deliberate, tracing her soaked form. Her breath hitched. Her swimsuit and cover-up clung to her skin, revealing more than she'd intended, and David's eyes darkened, a storm of their own. "Nothing," he said abruptly, looking away. "You're soaked. Get inside." Alice's cheeks burned, a mix of embarrassment and something else, something reckless. "What, no chivalrous jacket offer? I'm basically a rom-com cliché right now." She expected a retort, but David only chuckled, soft and fleeting, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine unrelated to the cold. Upstairs, the situation worsened. The resort's receptionist called with bad news. A generator had failed, and several rooms were without power. "We've had to consolidate bookings," the voice explained. "You'll be sharing a suite tonight." Alice's eyes widened. "Share? With him?" She glanced at David, who muttered something under his breath, his jaw tight. "Relax," he said, grabbing his keycard. "It's not like I'm planning anything," she huffed, crossing her arms. "Good, because I'm irresistible in wet clothes, and you'd be in trouble." His half-smile caught her off guard, a rare crack in his facade, and her heart skipped. The suite was luxurious but problematic. One sprawling bed dominated the room, its crisp white linens mocking their predicament. Alice pointed at it, her voice sharp. "How do we handle this?" David grabbed a pillow and tossed it onto a plush sofa. "I'll take this. Problem solved." He began unbuttoning his shirt, and Alice spun away, her face flaming. "What are you doing?" she squeaked, staring at the wall. "Changing," he said, amused. "You've seen a man without a shirt before, haven't you?" "Not you," she muttered, her imagination betraying her. David Scott shirtless was a problem. A 6-foot, sculpted problem she didn't need. She dove under the covers, pulling them to her chin. Good night, but sleep eluded her. The room was heavy with his scent, cedar and something distinctly David, and the knowledge that he was mere feet away, stretched out on the sofa. Thunder rumbled outside, shaking the windows, and Alice sat up, her heart racing. She glanced at David, his silhouette visible in the dim light, his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep?" she asked, her voice soft. He sighed. "Not used to sleeping away from home." She hesitated, then patted the bed. "Come here, just for a bit. That sofa looks like torture." David's eyebrows shot up. "What?" "Don't make it weird," she said, rolling her eyes. "I'm not proposing, just come." He studied her, his gaze intense, then rose slowly, moving to the bed's edge. The mattress dipped under his weight, and Alice held her breath. They were close, too close, his warmth radiating, his presence overwhelming. She could smell him, see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked to her lips. Her pulse thundered, louder than the storm outside. For a moment, neither spoke. Then David leaned closer, his breath grazing her cheek, his hand hovering near her face. Her heart stopped, anticipation curling in her stomach. Was he? But he froze, his expression shifting to something raw, almost pained. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice rough, and pulled back, retreating to the sofa like a man fleeing a fire. Alice's chest tightened, rejection stinging like salt in a wound. "Why do you always do that?" she whispered, but he didn't answer, his back to her, a wall of silence. She lay down, staring at the ceiling, tears prickling her eyes. The storm raged on, but the real tempest was inside her. David wasn't just cold, he was hiding something, a scar deeper than she'd imagined. And yet that almost kiss, the way he'd looked at her, felt like a truth he couldn't admit. As the rain battered the windows, Alice resolved to uncover it. She wasn't just a pawn in his contract anymore, she was falling for him. And that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Tomorrow she'd push harder, dig deeper, because whatever David was running from, it was pulling her in, and she wasn't sure she wanted to escape. The tropical storm had passed, but the tempest inside Alice Martin's raged on. The almost kiss in the resort suite, David Scott's abrupt retreat, and his cryptic words, "This is a mistake," echoed in her mind like a taunt. Back in his penthouse, the polished surfaces and city views felt colder, a mirror to the wall David had rebuilt between them. Their fake engagement continued, public smiles, staged touches, but privately he was distant, his gray eyes avoiding hers. Alice's resolve hardened. She wasn't just a prop in his contract anymore. She felt something real, and the suspicion that David did too drove her to uncover the truth he guarded so fiercely. Whatever he was hiding, she'd find it, even if it broke her. Days blurred into routine, scheduling David's meetings, dodging coworkers' whispers about their engagement, and navigating the penthouse's sterile silence. But the tension from that night clung to her, fueling her curiosity. Late one evening, alone in her room, Alice opened her laptop, her fingers hesitating over the keyboard. She'd never pried into David's life before, but the man who'd nearly kissed her, then fled, wasn't the untouchable CEO the world saw. He was haunted, and she needed to know why. Typing David Scott into the search bar, she sifted through the expected Forbes profiles, business accolades, photos of him in sharp suits. But buried in the results, an old article from a gossip site caught her eye. The headline hit like a punch: "David Scott betrayed, fiancé flees altar." Her breath caught. She clicked, heart pounding, and read. Years ago, David had been set to marry Isabella, a socialite whose beauty graced magazine covers. But on their wedding day, she'd vanished, leaving him humiliated before a crowd of elites, rumored to have run off with another man. A grainy photo showed David at the altar, his face a mask of devastation, his eyes hollow. Alice's chest tightened. This was it, the wound that made him a fortress. She closed the laptop, her mind racing. Isabella's betrayal explained his fear, his need for control, and his refusal to let anyone close. But it also made the gala kiss, the resort's fleeting intimacy, feel like cracks in his armor, moments he couldn't fake. Alice wasn't sure what scared her more, that she was falling for a man so broken, or that he might feel the same and still run. The next evening, David suggested dinner, a rare private outing without board members or cameras. Alice saw her chance. She chose a small, cozy restaurant, its dim lighting and soft jazz, a stark contrast to their usual glittering stages. Dressed in a simple black dress, she sat across from him, his navy suit unbuttoned, his guard lower than usual. They talked. Movies, travel, safe topics. But Alice's resolve burned. She couldn't keep pretending. Not when her heart was on the line. "David," she said, setting down her wine glass, her voice steady but soft. "Can I ask you something?" His eyes met hers, cautious but curious. "Depends." She leaned forward, her pulse racing. "Why are you so afraid of getting close? What happened to you?" The air shifted, heavy with unspoken truths. David's jaw tightened, his fingers pausing on his fork. For a moment, she thought he'd deflect, but then he spoke, his voice low, raw. "I trusted someone once. It didn't end well." "Isabella," she said, the name a gamble. His eyes widened, a flash of shock, then darkened with something like betrayal. "You researched me," he said, not a question, his tone edged with ice. "I had to understand you," she replied, refusing to back down. "You shut me out, David. Every time we get close, you run. I need to know why." He looked away, his fingers drumming the table, a rare sign of unease. "There's nothing to understand. I was naive. I believed in something that wasn't real. End of story." Alice's heart ached, but she pressed on. "Have you ever thought she didn't deserve you? That you're worth more than her betrayal?" Silence. His gaze flicked back to her, vulnerable for a fleeting second, and Alice saw it. The man beneath the mask, wounded but not gone. Her courage surged, words spilling before she could stop them. "David, I'm not her. I'm not pretending anymore. I love you." The world stopped. David froze, his face a storm of emotions. Shock, fear, longing. The restaurant faded, the jazz a distant hum. Alice's heart pounded, exposed, raw. She'd laid herself bare, and the weight of it was terrifying. But David didn't speak. His eyes searched hers, then hardened. He stood, chair scraping, and walked out, leaving his coat and her confession behind. Alice sat, stunned, tears prickling as the waiter hovered awkwardly. He'd run, just as she'd feared. The man who'd kissed her, who'd held her in the storm, couldn't face her truth. Pain clawed at her, but anger rose too. She deserved better than his silence, his fear. If he couldn't fight for her, she wouldn't beg. That night in the penthouse, Alice packed her suitcase, her movements mechanical. The fake ring glinted on the dresser, a symbol of their lie. She slipped it off, her fingers trembling, and placed it on the kitchen counter beside the contract. A note was her final act, scrawled in a rush. "You won, David. This time, you left me at the altar." She grabbed her bag and walked out, the doors click a guillotine on her heart. The city blurred through the taxi window, neon lights streaking like tears. Alice didn't know where she was going. Her old apartment was gone, her life in pieces. But she couldn't stay. David's rejection had shattered something in her, but it also set her free. She'd loved him, truly, but she wouldn't chase a man too scared to love her back. Meanwhile, David returned to the penthouse, the silence deafening. The note caught his eye first. Alice's handwriting a dagger. He read it, his breath hitching, the ring beside it glinting like an accusation. The apartment, once a sanctuary, felt like a tomb without her. Her laugh, her teasing, her warmth, gone. He sank onto the couch, the note crumpling in his fist. He'd run, just as Isabella had, and the realization gutted him. Alice wasn't just part of a contract. She was everything, and he'd let her go. His phone sat on the table, her number a tap away. But fear choked him. What could he say? That he was an idiot? That her words, "I love you," had undone him. For the first time, David Scott, the man who controlled empires, was powerless. But as he stared at the ring, a spark ignited. He'd lost her once. He wouldn't lose her again. Wherever Alice was, he'd find her. And this time, he'd fight. The cabin's porch creaked under Alice Martin's weight as she sat, wrapped in a faded quilt, staring at the ocean's restless waves. 3 days had passed since she'd fled David Scott's penthouse, leaving behind the fake ring, the contract, and her scrawled note, "You won, David. This time you left me at the altar." The seaside cabin, a childhood haven, was her refuge now, its weathered walls shielding her from the wreckage of her heart. She'd confessed her love, bared her soul, only for David to walk away, his silence a blade sharper than any rejection. Yet even here, his shadow lingered, his gray eyes, his fleeting warmth, the kiss that had felt too real. Alice hugged the quilt tighter, willing herself to let him go. But love, she was learning, was a stubborn ghost. Back in the city, David was unraveling. The penthouse, once a fortress of control, mocked him with its emptiness. Alice's note lay crumpled on his desk, her words a relentless echo. He hadn't gone to work, hadn't answered calls. The ring she'd left glinted like a taunt, and every corner held her absence, her laugh, her teasing, the way she'd made his sterile world feel alive. He'd run from her love, terrified by its power, but losing her was a pain he couldn't outrun. For the first time, David admitted the truth. He loved her desperately, and letting her go was the greatest mistake of his life. He grabbed his phone, dialing her number, but it rang unanswered. Texts went unread. Panic clawed at him. Where was she? He scoured her file, her background, grasping for clues. Then, a memory surfaced. A late-night conversation. Alice's voice soft as she described a seaside cabin where her family spent summers. A place of solace. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He snatched his car keys, determination overriding fear. He'd find her, no matter what it took. The drive was a blur of coastal roads and starless skies, his hands gripping the wheel as he rehearsed what he'd say. "I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. I love you." But words felt inadequate against the hurt he'd caused. The cabin emerged at dawn, a weathered structure nestled among dunes, its windows glowing faintly. David parked, his heart a drumbeat, and stepped into the salty air. He knocked, each rap a plea, and when the door opened, Alice stood there, her eyes wide with shock. "David?" Her voice was a mix of disbelief and wariness, her hair loose, her sweater oversized. She looked softer, unguarded, but her gaze held a guarded edge. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed, his throat dry. "I came for you." Her arms crossed, a shield against him. "What?" He stepped closer, his voice raw. "I was a fool, Alice. I ran because I was scared, but I can't ignore it anymore. I love you." The words, once impossible, spilled like a dam breaking. "I tried to deny it, but I can't. I need you." Alice's breath caught, her eyes searching his, but doubt shadowed her face. "You love me? You walked out, David. You left me standing there after I—" Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking back tears. "How do I believe you now?" He reached for her hands, but she pulled back. Desperation surged, and he gestured to his car. "Wait." He retrieved a folder from the trunk, its contents a gamble he'd made on the drive. He opened it, revealing a resignation letter addressed to Scott Enterprises board. "I quit," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of it. "I'm no longer CEO. I gave it all up." Alice's eyes widened, her mouth parting. "You What? The company's your life? It was, he said, stepping closer, his gaze locked on hers. But you're my future. I don't want contracts or control. I want you, us, for real. Her hands trembled, the folder shaking as she scanned the letter. Tears welled, but she shook her head. This is huge, David, but it doesn't erase what happened. I need time. I need to know you won't run again. His chest ached, but he nodded. I'll wait, as long as it takes. But I'm not giving up. His voice was a vow, fierce and unshaken. Alice looked at him, the man who'd once been a fortress, now stripped bare. She wanted to believe him, but fear held her back. Stay, she said finally, her voice soft. Prove it. He did. Over the next days, David became a fixture at the cabin, his presence quiet but constant. He walked with her on the beach, their footsteps mingling in the sand, their talks light but laced with unspoken hope. He tried cooking breakfast once, a disastrous attempt at pancakes that left flour on his shirt and laughter in the air. You're hopeless, Alice teased. But her smile was softer, her guard lowering with each small gesture. One evening, as they sat by a bonfire, the crackling flames casting shadows, Alice watched him. David's face, lit by the glow, was open, unguarded. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow. What? You're different, she said, her voice thoughtful. Less robotic. He chuckled, a sound she was growing to love. You're a bad influence. But his eyes held hers, warm and steady, and her heart stirred. She was falling again, but this time, it felt safe. The days stretched, each one a step toward trust. David didn't push, didn't demand, but his actions spoke louder than words. He fixed a loose porch step, shared stories of his childhood, and listened when Alice spoke of her fears, her family, her dreams. One night, as they watched the stars, Alice leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I'm starting to believe you, she whispered. He turned, his hand brushing her cheek. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Alice's heart raced, but she pulled back, not ready to leap. Keep proving it, she said, a challenge and a promise. David nodded, his resolve unshaken, but a new urgency flickered in his eyes. He'd given up his empire, his armor, but winning her heart was a battle he'd fight forever. As the cabin's quiet nights unfolded, Alice felt the shift. David wasn't just the man who'd hurt her. He was the man who'd chosen her, who'd dismantled his world to stand by her side. But love, she knew, needed more than gestures. It needed courage, and soon she'd have to decide. Could she risk her heart again, or would fear keep her tethered to the past? The answer was close, shimmering like the ocean under moonlight, and David's next move would light the way. The ocean whispered secrets as Alice Martin stood on the cabin's porch, the salty breeze tugging at her hair. Days of quiet moments with David Scott, beach walks, shared laughter, his steady presence, had softened the edges of her doubt. His resignation from Scott Enterprises, a sacrifice that upended his world, was proof of his love. But Alice still teetered on the brink. She'd challenged him to prove himself, and he had, with every gentle touch and unguarded smile. Yet, fear lingered, a shadow of his past flight and her own broken trust. Could she leap, knowing the fall might break her? The answer, she sensed, was coming, carried on the tide. That afternoon, David found her by the shore, his eyes bright with a nervous energy she hadn't seen before. "Meet me on the beach at sunset," he said, his voice low, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Wear something nice." Before she could question him, he walked away, leaving her with a flutter of anticipation and a question she couldn't voice. What was he planning? As the sun dipped, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Alice slipped into a white sundress, its soft fabric swaying against her skin. Her heart raced, a mix of nerves and hope, as she stepped onto the sand. The beach was transformed. A path of flickering candles wound through the dunes, their flames dancing in the breeze, rose petals scattered like whispers of a dream. At the path's end stood David, his white shirt open at the collar, his dark hair ruffled by the wind. He held a small velvet box, and when his eyes met hers, they shone with an emotion that stole her breath, love, raw and unyielding. Alice's steps faltered, her hand rising to her mouth. "David," she whispered, the scene overwhelming, a promise made real. He closed the distance, taking her hands, his touch warm and steady, grounding her in the moment. "Alice," he began, his voice a low tremor. "From the day you crashed into me, you turned my world upside down. You broke through my walls, made me feel when I swore I never would again." His thumbs brushed her knuckles, his gaze never wavering. "I spent years running from love, thinking it would weaken me, but you showed me it's my strength. You're my strength." Tears pricked her eyes, her heart swelling. He knelt, opening the box to reveal a ring, a delicate band with a single, sparkling stone, simple yet radiant. "Alice Martins, you're the one thing I can't lose. Will you marry me?" The world stilled, the waves a soft hymn, the candles a glowing vow. Alice's tears fell, not from pain, but from a joy so fierce it hurt. She'd loved him through fear, through doubt, and now he stood before her, offering not a contract, but his soul. "Yes," she sobbed, her voice breaking. 1,000 times, yes. David's face lit with a smile, pure and unguarded, as he slid the ring onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into a kiss that was deep, desperate, a seal on their future. Her arms wrapped around him, the taste of salt, and him anchoring her to this moment, this truth. They were no longer bound by pretense. This was real. Weeks later, the beach hosted their wedding, an intimate ceremony under a canopy of stars. White flowers framed a simple altar, their petals swaying in the night air, fairy lights twinkling like captured fireflies. Alice walked barefoot across the sand, her lace dress flowing like sea foam, her heart racing with every step. David waited, his suit tailored but tieless, his eyes locked on her, brimming with awe. To him, she was the universe, and the world faded away. The officiant's voice was a gentle hum, but Alice heard only David's heartbeat as he took her hands. When it was time for vows, he spoke first, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Alice, I built a life on control, on running from what scared me. But you showed me the risk of love is worth everything. I promise to stay, to fight, to love you every day, no matter what." Tears streamed down her face, her smile radiant. She squeezed his hands, her voice trembling but sure. "David, you were a storm I never saw coming. You tried to hide, but love found you, and I'm never letting go. I promise to be your partner, your challenge, your home, forever." The officiant smiled. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." David didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, his kiss fierce and tender, a vow deeper than words. The small crowd, family, a few close friends, cheered, but Alice and David were lost in each other, the stars their only witness. The reception unfolded on the sand, an open dance floor beneath swaying palms. Lights strung between trees cast a golden glow, and soft music mingled with the ocean song. David and Alice danced, her head against his chest, his arms a haven. "I still can't believe I married you," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. She laughed, tilting her head to meet his gaze. "Believe it, Mr. Scott. You're stuck with me now." He twirled her, his eyes alight with joy. "Good. Every second of it." As they swayed, Alice felt complete, The journey from a spilled coffee to this moment, a tapestry of chaos and love. David, once a man of walls, was hers. Open, real, hers. The music swelled and he kissed her again, slow and deep, the world dissolving into their embrace. Under the stars, they were home. The future stretched before them, unpredictable but theirs to shape. Alice knew one thing. With David by her side, every challenge, every joy would be theirs to share. Their love, born from a contract, had rewritten their stars, and nothing would tear them apart. What a journey for Alice and David, from a coffee-soaked collision to vows beneath the stars. We hope their story of love-defying contracts touched your heart. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did David's sacrifice win you over? Or was Alice's courage the real spark? Share where you're listening from and let us know. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. Your support means the world. Subscribe and hit the bell to catch our next tale of passion and promise. Until then, keep believing in love's unexpected turns. See you soon.